So let's start by picturing a scenario that, well, pretty much every professional has faced at some point. You're sitting at your computer staring at this totally blank application box, or maybe you're sitting right across the table from a hiring manager.
Right, yeah. We've all been there.
And a system, whether that's an actual human being, a recruiter, or just some algorithm, asks you to prove what you can do. And when that moment hits, do you panic and start oversharing every single detail to prove your worth? Or do you kind of freeze up, assume they just won't get the nuance of your work, and end up underselling yourself?
I mean, it's a really profound tension. We step into the labor market, and there is this immense, almost crushing pressure to just, validate our existence as workers.
Oh, totally.
And because the system is so opaque, it forces us into this very uncomfortable corner. We feel like we basically have to choose between our privacy and our livelihood.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. We are looking at a really fascinating set of source materials. Specifically, we're diving into Book 3 of the Living Professional Record Framework Phase 5, which focuses on governance and deep utility, along with its companion guide, the Professional Truth Workbook.
Yeah, and for those who maybe aren't familiar, this framework is essentially a survival manual for the modern job market.
Right, and we are moving way beyond the theoretical today. The mission here is to understand how you can actually build, maintain, and govern a private, worker-owned evidence layer for your career.
Because the stakes for figuring this out are just incredibly high right now. I mean, the modern labor market demands concrete proof of your skills, but the way you submit that proof is increasingly being filtered through AI and applicant tracking systems, or ATS.
Right, so we're talking about systems like Workday Skills Cloud, Greenhouse, iSigns, Bullhorn. If you've applied for a job in like the last 5 years, you've definitely interacted with one of these. But handing these systems everything they want, like every tiny detail of every project you've ever touched, it compromises your privacy, it compromises your employer's trade secrets, and honestly, it strips away your own dignity. So today we're going to explore how you protect your professional truth.
Yeah, and the source material frames this central tension brilliantly, I think.
Yeah.
It introduces this core concept called proof without exposure.
Proof without exposure. I like that.
Right. But the problem is that the modern demand for evidence naturally pushes workers into this trap of overexposure. People feel this intense pressure to prove they actually did the complex work they're claiming.
Right, so they panic.
Exactly. In a panic, they start sharing proprietary client roadmaps or sensitive internal conflict resolutions or even, and this is crazy protected patient and student data, just to show their impact.
Well, I mean, I can completely understand why someone would do that, though, because if you don't share the juicy, specific details of a massive project, won't the ATS algorithms or the recruiters just assume you didn't do anything important?
That's the fear, yeah.
Yeah. It feels a bit like it's like a bank asking for your credit score to approve a loan, and out of pure anxiety that they won't believe you, you just hand over your banking passwords, your middle school diary, and like 10 years of tax returns. You just want them to believe you're good for the money.
That is a perfect analogy, and the Federal Trade Commission and the USTTO actually validate that exact fear. But they also outline why that oversharing is so dangerous.
Okay, how so?
Well, the text references the FTC's Protecting Personal Information Guide and the USPTO's Trade Secret Policy, along with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's guidelines on AI for workers. And all these sources point to the massive legal and ethical risks of this kind of overexposure.
But we have to look at the mechanism driving this, right?
Exactly. Applicant tracking systems like Workday or iSigns, they're designed to take an incredibly nuanced, complex human experience and just flatten it down into sterile, searchable keywords. So the worker looks at that system and feels like they have to just scream their proprietary details to stand out from the noise.
Okay, but let me push back on that a little bit, or at least try to work through the logic here.
Sure.
If I can't share the highly specific details of a project because it violates an FTC or USPTO guideline, but I also know the Greenhouse or Workday algorithm will filter me out if I don't show concrete impact. What is the actual antidote here? How do you navigate a system that demands details you aren't legally allowed to share?
Well, the framework provides a structural antidote, and they call it the privacy layer. The whole idea is that privacy isn't just some afterthought you apply right before an interview. It's built into how you document your evidence from day one.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
You basically categorize every single piece of professional evidence you gather into one of 5 distinct privacy tiers. There's public, shareable with care, summary only, private, and do not use externally.
Got it. I mean, Public makes total sense. If I publish an article, filed a patent, gave a talk, that's already out in the world, and private is obviously just for my own memory. But that middle ground seems incredibly tricky to navigate.
It is. That middle ground is where most professionals really stumble. And it requires understanding the crucial difference between three distinct methods of hiding information: redaction, anonymization, and abstraction.
Right, okay. Let's break those down.
So most people instinctively default to redaction. They just draw a black box over the client's name or the specific revenue numbers.
Why?
But the framework warns that a redacted document can still reveal way too much proprietary information just through sheer context.
Right, because if I redact the company name, but the document describes a massive supply chain merger in the aerospace industry in Seattle, anyone with a LinkedIn account can figure out who I'm talking about.
Exactly.
So redaction doesn't really work. What about anonymization, like just changing the detail?
Anonymization is definitely better, like swapping out a specific vendor name for, a large tech company. But again, highly unique situations or specialized workflows are still easily identifiable to industry insiders.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is why the text strongly advocates for the third method, which is abstraction. Abstraction means you intentionally move the example up a conceptual level. You're describing the type of problem you solved rather than the specific details of the problem itself.
Could you give like a concrete example of how that actually looks?
Sure. Let's say you managed a highly confidential product launch that involved fixing a really toxic dynamic between the engineering and marketing teams.
Okay.
Instead of sharing a proprietary project document or describing the specific interpersonal drama, you abstract it. You say something like, coordinated a sensitive multi-stakeholder process improvement effort in a regulated environment, bridging conflicting departmental priorities.
Oh, wow. Okay.
See, you're preserving the absolute truth of your capability, your conflict resolution and project management skills, without exposing the messy substance of the actual event.
That makes a lot of sense. You're basically giving them the shape of the puzzle piece without showing them the picture painted on it. But, that brings up a massive secondary issue. Because if we're talking about how we write our resumes and prepare for interviews right now, the primary tool workers are turning to is generative AI.
Oh, absolutely.
And if we're dealing with abstracting sensitive proprietary data, just like copying and pasting your rough project notes into a chatbot seems like stepping onto a landmine.
It is a huge landmine, and the sources are incredibly clear about the risks here. They point specifically to the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, their artificial intelligence risk management framework, and the generative AI profile.
Right.
Because when workers paste their raw private resumes and detailed project notes into a free consumer-grade AI tool to generate more professional language, they are risking massive, irreversible data leaks.
Yeah, because we have to remember the mechanism behind these AI tools. When you paste your notes into the free version of a chatbot, you are essentially feeding their training data.
Yeah.
You don't own that information anymore.
Precisely. And the text highlights the critical enterprise privacy variations between tools like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Microsoft Copilot. There is a fundamental difference between a walled garden, enterprise-level AI, where your data is protected, and a public consumer AI that just ingests everything you type.
So if you dump evidence that you categorized in your private tier into a public AI tool, you've completely breached your own privacy layer.
You have. But the data leak is really only half the problem. The other half is what AI fundamentally does to the truth. The workbook identifies this phenomenon as drift.
Drift. Okay, I feel like relying on AI for a resume is like trusting a rogue GPS system. It sounds incredibly confident telling you to turn left, but if you actually listen to it without checking the environment, you're going to drive your car straight off a cliff during the interview.
Yes, drift is exactly that rogue GPS. And the framework breaks this down into two distinct types. First, there's role drift.
Role drift. Okay, what's that?
That happens when the AI takes a really humble bullet point where you say you supported a senior manager on a project, and it independently decides to optimize that language by claiming you led the project.
Which is just a lie.
It is, but the AI doesn't know that. It's just trying to sound impressive. The second type is scope drift.
Okay.
This is where you give the AI your notes about a small 2-week pilot project you ran with a couple of colleagues, and the AI turns it into an enterprise-wide global transformation initiative.
Oh, man. And then you walk into the interview room. The hiring manager is incredibly impressed by this global transformation you supposedly spearheaded. They ask you to walk them through your change management strategy for the European market.
And you just freeze.
Right. You have to backtrack in real time. You have to sit there and say, well, actually, it was just me and two interns testing a new software tool for a week. You instantly lose all credibility.
And the tragic part is, the AI wasn't maliciously trying to lie to the hiring manager. It was simply trying to generate the most persuasive, highly scored language possible to get past those applicant tracking systems we talked about earlier.
So how do we stop this from happening?
To combat this drift, the workbook introduces a governance process called claim mapping and assessing claim maturity.
Okay, let's slow down on that because that sounds a bit technical. If I'm trying to map a claim, let's say I want to put Python programming on my resume. Is that a claim I need to map? How do I actually do that?
Yes. Program in Python is definitely a claim. The framework forces you to sort that claim into a specific maturity category. There are 6. Proven, supported, emerging, context-dependent, outdated, or unsupported.
Okay, so how do I decide where it goes?
You look at your private evidence layer. If you took a weekend boot camp in Python but haven't used it since, that is an emerging claim. If you use it every day to automate your team's workflow and have performance reviews praising that work, it's a proven claim. The overarching goal here is what the framework calls right-sized confidence.
Meaning I don't want to overstate it, but I also don't want to understate it.
Right. When the AI generates a bullet point for your resume, you don't just blindly accept it. You check it against your claim map. Is this massive impact claim the AI just generated actually proven by my evidence? Or did the AI just invent an unsupported claim to make me sound better?
That makes a lot of sense.
This governance process prevents AI-generated inflation. But crucially, it also prevents personal self-erasure. It stops you from deleting an emerging skill off your resume just because imposter syndrome is telling you that you aren't good enough yet.
Okay, I am tracking with the theory here. We know how to abstract our data to protect our employers, and we know how to map our claims to govern the AI so it doesn't just hallucinate our achievements. But I have to be honest. Looking at this process, I am feeling a heavy dose of skepticism. I have a demanding job. I have a personal life. Sitting down to categorize my notes into 5 privacy tiers and map the maturity of every claim I make, it sounds like I'm taking on a second, entirely unpaid HR job in my evenings. Is this actually worth the effort?
Well, the authors anticipate that exact resistance because burnout is real. The core boundary rule of the entire workbook is designed to address this. It states, the record serves the worker. The worker does not feed the system.
I like the sound of that.
Right. If this process feels like you are just optimizing yourself into a better data object for an ATS, you are doing it wrong. It has to be practical.
So how do we start this without immediately getting overwhelmed by the sheer volume of our past work?
You start with a surface audit. You just look at your current resume or your LinkedIn profile and ask one simple question. What is carrying too much weight here?
What do you mean by that?
Like, what is a bullet point that you secretly hope no one asks you about because you don't actually have the evidence to back it up?
Yeah.
From there, you build what they call a minimum viable record.
Okay.
You do not sit down and try to document your entire professional life from day one. You just take one recent project and you answer 5 basic questions. What happened? What did I contribute? What evidence exists? What claim might this support? And what should absolutely not be shared?
One thing that really stands out in the source material is how it handles non-traditional career paths. Because not everyone has a linear corporate trajectory where their projects fit neatly into these little boxes.
Oh, the adaptations are arguably the most powerful part of the framework.
Yeah.
There are specific modules built for veterans and career changers, for example. It provides a structured military-to-civilian evidence map.
That's huge.
It is, because the challenge for a lot of veterans, or even people transitioning out of intense, unpaid caregiving roles, is how to translate those massive logistical and emotional undertakings into civilian corporate claims.
Yeah, because caregiving isn't just sitting in a room. It involves complex scheduling, medical advocacy, crisis response, budgeting, and just immense emotional labor. It is highly complex work.
It absolutely is. And the workbook gives you a method to abstract and map those skills without flattening that complex, beautiful human experience into gross corporate jargon. There are also adaptations for families and youth, which I found fascinating.
Right, teaching teenagers how to document their skills. But my fear there is that we're just pushing the anxiety of the labor market onto younger and younger kids, you know?
And the workbook explicitly warns against that. The youth adaptation is built on a strict privacy-first rule. It is vehemently against turning childhood into a sterile employability project where every hobby is just a resume builder.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's strictly about helping young people build healthy evidence-gathering habits now, so that 10 years down the line, they aren't forced to frantically reconstruct their past during a career crisis.
Well, let's actually talk about that crisis moment, because that is where the rubber meets the road. You've done the surface audit, you've built the minimum viable record. Now you were sitting in the interview room.
The fun part.
Right. The adrenaline is spiking, the hiring manager asks you a complex behavioral question, and your mind just goes completely blank. How does this private abstracted record actually help me in that room?
The framework calls this process interview rehydration.
Rehydration.
Yeah, think about what an ATS or a recruiter is looking at before you walk into the room. Your resume is a dehydrated document. The claims are dry, contextless bullet points optimized for a machine.
Right.
Interview rehydration is the method of using your private record to quickly restore the water. The context, the specific constraints you faced, the unique role you played, and the judgment you had to exercise back into your answer.
So instead of trying to frantically make up a star format answer, situation, task, action, result on the fly while you're sweating in the chair, you already have the abstracted, safe, right-sized truth mapped out in your head.
Exactly. It completely prevents that pre-meeting panic. It ensures you are speaking from a place of documented professional truth. You aren't relying on what you happen to remember while your fight or flight response is fully engaged.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know exactly what you did, you know exactly what claim it supports, and you know exactly where the privacy boundaries are.
Okay, I see the value. I build the minimum viable record, I map the claims, I use it to rehydrate my interview answers, and I get the job.
Ooh.
But here is where my own personal habits would inevitably fail me. The final piece of this governance puzzle is longevity. How in the world do you maintain this record over a 5 or 10-year career so it doesn't just become this digital graveyard of forgotten notes that you never look at again?
Well, that is human nature, right? We build systems and then abandon them. But the framework addresses this directly with a 30-day build plan, which is designed to establish a maintenance rhythm that is so small it doesn't trigger your procrastination reflex.
Okay, break that rhythm down for me. If I'm the listener trying to implement this next week, what am I actually doing?
It starts with the weekly capture. This is not some deep journaling session. It is 5 to 15 minutes at the end of your week.
I can do that.
Exactly. Your only focus is capturing the transient context that you will inevitably forget if you wait until next month. What constraint suddenly shifted on Tuesday? What difficult decision required your specific judgment on Thursday? You just jot it down.
Okay, that's easy enough.
Then you have a monthly review, which takes about 30 minutes. That is when you clean up your weekly notes, add tags or metadata, and ensure your privacy labels are correct. Finally, there's the quarterly claim review.
And what's that?
This is a broader look where you ask, is this claim still proven? Have I gathered enough evidence to move my Python skill from emerging to supported?
I think of it kind of like tending to a garden versus trying to build a monument.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because if you only ever do yard work when you are trying to sell your house, it is a massive, stressful landscaping crisis. You're out there on the weekend with a machete trying to clear years of overgrowth, and you're just miserable.
Yeah, you're exhausted.
But if you just go out and pull one weed every week, it's just a normal Tuesday. It's routine. It doesn't cause panic.
The gardening metaphor works perfectly here because part of tending a garden is knowing what to discard. The framework places a heavy emphasis on the necessity of retiring claims and deleting files.
Deleting files.
Yes. A living record requires pruning. If you spent 5 years doing a specific type of project management, but you absolutely hate it and never want to be hired for it again, you retire that claim. You take it out of rotation.
And the deleting files part. Because,
Damn.
I mean, as a digital pack rat, the idea of deleting my work history actually gives me anxiety.
Well, you must destroy sensitive files or outdated evidence that you no longer need, specifically to avoid your private record mutating into a toxic self-surveillance database. If you keep everything forever, the record becomes a burden, not a tool.
That concept of the record becoming a burden feels really profound to me, especially when you think about looking back at old jobs, because some jobs are incredibly toxic.
Absolutely.
And sitting down for a quarterly review to look at evidence from a manager who mistreated you or a project that ended in total disaster, I mean, sometimes you just don't want to think about it. You just want to leave it in the past.
And this touches on what the framework calls emotional governance. I think it might be the most compassionate part of the entire methodology.
How so?
The text is explicit. When the record feels too heavy, or when reviewing a toxic job brings up genuine pain, the worker is given absolute permission to pause.
Wow.
Yeah. The record is a practical tool designed for carrying your professional truth through a broken algorithmic system. It is not a measure of your human worth. You are under no obligation to turn every painful, toxic experience into a neatly packaged professional lesson for an employer.
That's incredibly validating.
Dignity includes having the right to draw boundaries around your own pain.
Which really brings us to the core synthesis of this entire deep dive. If you take nothing else away from this discussion today, let it be this deeply empowering realization. You are not your resume.
Absolutely not.
And you are certainly not the flattened, keyword-stuffed, hyper-optimized summary that an ATS algorithm or a generative AI chatbot produces just to satisfy a corporate filter.
Right. By systematically building a governed private evidence layer, by using these tools to abstract your sensitive data, log your AI usage to prevent drift, and capture your context before it fades, you are taking back the authorship of your own professional history.
You're taking back control.
Exactly. You protect your data, you right-size your confidence, and you carry your truth intact through systems that were quite literally designed to filter you out.
So we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you navigate your own career. If a hiring algorithm like Workday or Greenhouse were to perfectly read and evaluate your current resume right now, whose version of your career is it actually evaluating?
That's the real question.
Is it yours? Or is it the hyperinflated panic version you invented just to please the machine? It is time to stop handing over your diary just to prove your credit score. It's time to start documenting the work beneath the work.